can I follow that? There's always a sense of relief. Thank you, Peter, when you get up to speak sort of at the end, in the hope that nobody else has spoken in contradiction to what you're going to say. So there's a sense of relief there. I think before I start talking about 2015 and visions and values in the future, I think it's worth taking a step back. For the benefit of those who may have not been to a UKIP meeting before, and as a reminder for those who have. There are some foundations that it's important to remember. UKIP is not an anti-immigration political party. We are not anti-immigration. If you're a doctor, if you're a nurse, if you're an engineer, if you're somebody that can contribute to our society, you're very welcome to come here, and you will always be very welcome to come here. What we stand opposed to is uncontrolled mass immigration. A level of immigration that changes the very fabric of our society, changes our communities so that we no longer recognise them. Now, it's not politically correct to say so I'll say it anyway. Right now there are 54 million unemployed people in Europe. There's absolutely nothing stopping any of those people from coming here to Britain tomorrow to seek work. The free movement of people within the European Union is an absolutely cast iron guarantee. As Mr. Juncker made clear this week, it's non-negotiable. It's no wonder that England is now the most populous country in the whole of Europe, is it? And that's the risk that we're exposed to, and that's all UKIP stands against, is that risk. We do not want to bring the drawbridge up and stop anybody from coming to this country. That's an important thing I need to make clear. UKIP is not opposed to foreign aid. We are not opposed to foreign aid. As I think we said, the fourth or sixth largest economy in the world, we know our duty. I want Britain to be leading the world when aid is needed in a real humanitarian crisis. But what we have right now is a situation where foreign aid is given to meet a manifesto promise, to meet a financial target. We give foreign aid to countries such as India, who has a space programme, and who just this very week announced that they're going to build the biggest statue in the world. Now, does that sound like a country for foreign aid? Before a single penny of my tax money goes in foreign aid, though, I want to make sure that everybody in this country is fed, is warm, is safe, and is housed, because British aid always comes before foreign aid.
Yeah.
We're not racist, we're not sexist, we're not homophobic, we're not xenophobic, or any other phobic you can possibly think of. But there's no denying the fact that there have been people associated with UKIP in the past who've said things which are less than acceptable. Less than acceptable to me, less than acceptable to my colleagues. And they don't reflect the UKIP that we know. Let me ask you to consider this. Does anybody in the room seriously believe that the Labour Party thinks that white people love playing divide and rule over black people? No, of course not. It's a ridiculous statement to make. But hang on, Labour MP Diane Abbott said that in 2012. Does that make it true? Does anyone think that the Conservative supporters think that people who wear burqas are likened to women wearing bin bags? Of course they don't. The Conservative councillor Chris Jordan said that, so does that make it true? No, that level of allegation only seems to apply to UKIP. And we're going to see more and more and more of that as we move towards the campaign in 2015 and things become unpleasant, and we're prepared for that. Look, we're not trained public speakers. We're not trained politicians. We are just normal people, no different from you. But we feel passionately enough about our country to stand up here on the warmest day of the year at the King's Head at Bishop's Cleeve and speak from the heart. But I think that one amateur UKIP person stood here speaking for their country is worth 100 trained politicians in Westminster speaking up for their own self-centred political parties. I'd like you to come with me on a journey now. Come with me on a journey to 2020, 6 years from now, 5 years after the next election. What does our country look like? Let's assume we've got some UKIP MPs in place. let's assume we've perhaps managed to extract ourselves, or are in the process of extracting ourselves from the European Union. And I don't want to look at Great Britain through my eyes. Why don't we look at it through the eyes of my children? What do I hope and aspire for them? My eldest daughter, she'll be 27, and that's quite frightening. She's about to be a mum with number one grandchild. We don't know the sex yet. But she happens to be disabled. And by being disabled, she has a lot of interaction with the National Health Service and has done for many, many years. And it's on that I'd like to focus. Because I'd like to see a country in 2020 that devotes as much resources to mental health issues as it does to physical health issues. Funding to mental health issues has been slashed in the last Parliament. I'd like to see an NHS where when I go to the doctor says, what is the best care for that person, and not, what's the best thing that we can afford? I want to see an NHS which focuses resources on frontline nursing, frontline doctors, changing that ratio of managers to frontline staff that we've got at the moment. I want to see an NHS that always keeps that principle of free at the point of need. The NHS must never ever be charged to British citizens. I will never stand up for that. Number one son, Scott, he's building a career for himself, and that's great. Hopefully by 2020 he'll have left home. But I want him to work for a company that trades across the world. It isn't just defined by trading within the European Union or who the European Union says we can trade with. And I want him to be working with skilled people from all over the world, as I've said earlier, who are contributing to our society. I want Scott to be paying tax, a fair rate of tax with a maximum peak of 40%, which is gradually incremented so that he remains incentivised to work. But most of all, I want Scott knowing that every single penny he pays in tax goes to fund Britain, and not £55 million a day to the European Union. Number two son, Sam. Now he's at college at the moment, studying for system support qualification. And my wife and I went to see his tutor 8 weeks ago. And we were a bit surprised, because Sam doesn't say very much because he's a bit of a moody teenager like they all are. But his tutor said he's doing brilliantly well. He's going to get 3 distinction stars. Any university in the country will welcome him in. And we thought, that's brilliant. And then we thought, my God, how are we going to afford that? How are we going to afford that? The choices we've got, we try and fund Sam through university, or Sam funds himself and comes out with a £30,000 bill before he even starts work. Well, that's wrong, isn't it? That's wrong. Look, second only to keeping us safe, it's my view that the government's responsibility is to educate our children. And I firmly believe that education should be free at the point of need, from toddlers, nursery schools, right the way through the education system. For some that means grammar schools, for some that means technical colleges, for some that means apprenticeships, for some that means university. But it should all be based upon the ability of the pupil, not on money. We will happily fund that, I will happily fund that from my tax money. Number 3 son, you'll be pleased to know there are no more after this. Number 3 son, now he'll be at that decision point in 6 years' time. Do I go into work, or do I go to further education? Well, if he chooses to go into work, firstly, I want there to be a job available for him. Because I want jobs in Gloucestershire made available to people in Gloucestershire before they're offered to the European Union. And presumably he'll start at the bottom of the ladder on the minimum wage. And as we've already announced, UKIP is committed to freeing taxpayers on minimum wage earners from tax. But I'd like to see that extended, and that moves me on to talking about our more elderly relatives. All of our parents are still alive, thankfully, although not in the best of health. And my mother-in-law should have retired many years ago, but still has to work. She still has to work because of the amount of tax she pays on her pension. And I find that so wrong. She's worked all of her life, they've saved as much as they could, they've never claimed any benefits, they've got a small pension, they've got a state pension, and they pay tax on it. To the extent that they have to keep working. It's crazy. So I would like to see, and I will, it's not a UKIP policy yet, but I will campaign for it, to see that tax threshold at least covering the basic state pension. And I personally would like to campaign to see all pensioners free from taxation at a certain level at a certain age. It's not a UKIP policy, but it's something that I will absolutely campaign for. Now, I was at a meeting about 2 weeks ago, a small meeting that we did in Tewkesbury, and naturally it was in a pub, and we came out, and I was chatting to a guy at the bar afterwards, and he said, "Stuart, why should we vote for you? Why are you different from the guy we've got in now?" So I thought, what?
I said, haven't they got that yet?
No. It was a fair question, and he had a few points. And I thought that was a very reasonable question. I want my representation to be built upon three pillars. The first of which, is Caroline's already mentioned, is integrity. But what does integrity mean? Really, integrity means? It means being honest. It means being honest even when you get things wrong. It means not abusing the system. It means not taking second homes in London and expecting to make profit on it, but staying in hotels, which is far more cost effective. It means not making profit out of expenses. It means not employing family members, let alone employing two family members. And it goes, I think, hand in hand with the second pillar, which is communication. And we have such an opportunity for a step change in communication. So, those of you may already know, I'm very active online at the best of times. But you can also expect to see me stand in front of you once a month with a report that says, this is how I voted in the last month, this is what's coming up in Parliament in the next month. Let's have a discussion about it. Just this very week, our MP announced that he stands opposed to the legislation on assisted suicide. And that's fine. We've all got our opinions on that, and he's entitled to his opinion. But for anyone that read the Gloucestershire Echo headline, articles and comments underneath that, will have seen a huge swathe of opinion that said, what gives you the right to say that in our name? When did you ask us that? Wouldn't the headline be much better if it said, our MP supports or doesn't support this legislation and seeks your opinion? I think that's called democracy, isn't it? Yeah, I think so. That's where I want to go. And the third pillar. The third pillar is focus. You can't achieve everything. You can aspire to, but you can't achieve everything. But there are certain core kernel issues that I'd like to campaign for. And if you can expect in a monthly meeting for me to report on these issues, I want to actually run you through those issues so that you know exactly what you're getting now before we go down the road. We've already mentioned flooding. Julian mentioned flooding earlier. In my mind, it's not really a rocket science issue to solve it. We keep building houses for a start. And those houses may not be on the floodplain, but every time we build a house, we take ground away, we reduce the ability of water to soak in the ground. It's been a generation since the Severn and the Avon were dredged. Now we know the European Union says that can no longer be dealt with as fertiliser. The silt is now an industrial waste. But I guarantee you I'll camp outside the Environmental Agency's door until they deal with that. That will be an absolute priority for me. You'll find me opposing housing schemes and standing up against the Borough Council if that's what need be, if I think that those schemes will impact flooding in Tewkesbury. I find it a scandal. I find it unbelievable that us as the sixth largest economy in the world have food banks. Can you believe that? We have food banks in this constituency. I think there are 3 charities in all that manage food banks for us. Now the reason for those food banks, I'm sure, are varied. For some it's the hated bedroom tax. For others it may be social issues. For others it may be other welfare issues. I vowed to campaign to get rid of the reasons for those food banks being there. Absolutely. Absolutely campaign to get rid of those. We've already announced, as a UKIP policy, the business rates. percentage of business rates will be retrained locally, and that's great. But I want to go further. I want our borough council to ring-fence that money to make sure that every area in this constituency has at least one free council car park. In that way, we start to regenerate our house streets again. And I get behind children's organisations, Boys Brigade, Girl Guides, Scouts. My children went to those organisations and came away the better for it, and I want everybody to have the opportunity to go to those organisations. And most of all, I want my children, your children, our children to have the ability to work here in Gloucestershire, here in Tewkesbury. So I campaign that if there's a job available here, that it goes here to local people before it's offered anywhere else in the country. Enough talking about me. We need to talk about you now. Because I'm now appealing to you, as Peter's done. There are a group of people in Tewkesbury that hold power. They hold a significant amount of power. These are the people that enact central government policy. These are the people that decide where the houses are going to be built. These are the people that decide that you're going to have a 54-acre solar farm just up the road outside Bishop's Cleeve. Do they listen to you? My experience of them says, not very often. And of course, I'm talking about our borough council. So this is a direct appeal to you. Stand for UKIP on Tewkesbury Borough Council next year. You can make a real difference if you dedicate the time and energy to free ourselves up from that borough council. Because that's where real democracy will come back. I think next year, at the election, you need to ask yourselves a question. Don't be surprised if you vote the same old way, and you get the same old representatives doing the same old thing. Yeah? Don't be surprised. But if you want to shake up the political establishment, if you want your friends to shake up the political establishment, tell everybody. If you want to send people to Westminster with fire in their bellies who are going to make change, then you know where to vote. The choice remains with you. Thank you very much.